So that comes center stage, although let me just find Jamie, pin, and I'll actually have to edit this out, I'm realizing. Okay, so welcome everybody to Phenomenal Conversation, nominally 49 in the series. I'm very, very grateful to have Jamie Bristow here, and we're going to be exploring the big topics of love and power and systemic change and how those two dynamics apply. But before I go into that, I just want to introduce Phenomenal Conversations. So Phenomenal Conversations attempt to co-create and contribute to a regenerative worldview. And we do that by interviewing change makers such as Jamie, that I think are living the change, that are putting the values they speak about into action in their daily lives. We also try to amplify imagination in the midst of the polycrisis. We try to expand meaningfulness and nuance in a chaotic world, and then also ask profound questions. And there's two formats, as you might gather. This is the live format, but there's also a general podcast one-on-one format that also comes out twice a month, in addition to once every 6 weeks or once every 2 months live podcast. So that being said, I'm very, very pleased to ask Jamie to give some background to his work and give us some context for why this is an important conversation to pursue. And then I've got a number of questions to follow up from there. So thank you, Jamie. Please go ahead and share what you feel is relevant to today's conversation.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for giving us the forum to air these topics. These are big primary colors of of heart and mind and human systems that it's important to look at in context of what's going on today. I'm coming to this particular call feeling quite heavy with fascism, to be completely honest. Like I read an email first thing this morning, and it's been with me all day as a result of that. We are really going through something. And rather than it being long-term, slow-moving threats that I've been working on, say, for 15 years, like climate change, we now have some pretty fast-moving, immediate threats, and that really changes the playing space for social change, for change agents, and we need to acknowledge that, and that we're being called into different sorts of showing up as a result, different sorts of courage, different sorts of speaking up, and yes, love and power, I think, have a lot to say in the kind of speaking up that we need to do. These times demand, I think, for us to speak differently, not just argue well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that helps, say, right-wing populists cut through is that they have been speaking differently.
Yeah.
They've been speaking, you could say, well, from the gut or from the heart. And that has been qualitatively different from the triangulation that most politicians have been trying to do, since, well, through the 90s and onwards. It's become very, very dry, became very dry, very calculated and very removed from, an authentic experience of the person who is communicating.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. That's kind of what's with me right now.
Sure.
My background initially was, I guess I've always been a communicator. I started out working in advertising and marketing, communicating for hire, until I realized that was really a bad thing, both for me and for the world. I was manufacturing discontent, essentially, in order to sell products. And it was my spiritual practice and inquiry into the nature of suffering, the causes of suffering, how to get out of those patterns, that made me realize the fundamental role of dissatisfaction and most forms of desire. So I shifted my ambitions from being the chief executive of an ad agency to solving climate change. And, we were still back then in the kind of solving mindset.
Yeah.
And we were still in a information deficit hypothesis mindset. We just tell people facts about the
and
world.
They'll change.
And they'll change. And we would, this was even back in 2010.
Yeah.
There was a sense that we weren't going to be able to turn this tanker around. And my time there was quite dispiriting, my time in the climate movement, for one reason or another. And I looked at myself and I thought, why did I suddenly go from working in advertising to working in climate? Well, it was my meditation practice, my inner work.
Yeah.
So that led me to turning essentially communication skills to meditation in the first instance, mindfulness, compassion, and then inner development more broadly, largely in a policy frame, working in the British Parliament. And there's a whole story that I won't go into behind that, but we can later on if you like. But essentially, I have been trying to legitimize approaches, practices, capacities in heart and mind, and indeed the whole inner realm in mainstream policymaking and public discourse, because we have probably certainly since the Enlightenment, or scientific Western Enlightenment, had a very skewed view of who we are and what's going on and how to make the world better, and it's won us some serious progress in some narrow domains, but causes all kinds of problems. So through that work with mindfulness, I was writing policy reports, creating, what can be called like a solid invitation to a liquid experience. The practice of mindfulness is difficult to explain, much easier to taste the orange rather than describe it.
Yeah.
But you do need to give people a kind of a rational case, often, particularly when you're talking about, public policy, and putting a reference after every line. So we did that. And in order to really make the case that mindfulness wasn't just a well-being intervention, wasn't just a sticky plaster or a calming thing that, a nice to have, optional extra, but instead it was in some way foundational. Like this was a foundational capacity of heart and mind, which shaped and colors everything the mind touches. When the mind is more able to attend to what's important, what's going on in and around us, as it's occurring, with the qualities of openness, curiosity, and care, then everything the mind touches is different than it would be if we are fragmented, distracted, inflexible, closed-minded, incurious, and cold. Of course, our lives are different and our relationships are different. And the way we show up in the world and what we want in the world for ourselves and for everybody is different. But I had to really make the case that it goes that deep.
Yeah.
And so I asked the question of myself, and working as director of this policy institute, asked the question: okay, so what is the deepest story we can tell here? What is the deepest why for mindfulness being foundational? Because we have this intuition. When I say we, that's the politicians and the philosophers and the professors and the volunteers who showed up to this thing happening in the British Parliament, this policy inquiry process. And the first story I came across was like, well, I guess fundamentally it underpins our agency, our ability to enact and resist change in the world. Yeah, and that's a pretty primary story. It goes to the root of our sovereignty as individuals, groups, countries, etc. And there's a way in which we talk about mindfulness as like, oh yeah, we'll calm you down or whatever, but most fundamentally, perhaps, it creates that space in between stimulus and response, that space in which you can choose.
Yeah.
And a regulated attention that allows you to do that is a kind of a sacred gift, because it's the foundation of choice making, of being a sovereign individual in the world. And we broke agency down in this report called Mindfulness Developing Agency in Urgent Times into 3 dimensions of perception, understanding, and then sort of action, collaborative action in the world. And under those 3 chapters, as if you like, threaded the evidence base as it is, the kind of 20,000 plus articles that reference mindfulness that are now out there, into this story. And it's people were like, oh, this puts flesh on the bones of my deepest intuitions. This, gives you a solid invitation that you can hand to people.
Yeah.
Something that's otherwise quite difficult to explain. And that was very well received. And then we wanted to do something specifically on climate. The agency document was more about the poly crisis, if you like.
Yeah.
All of the ways in which things were getting tricky, from AI to polarization, environment, etc. But then it really felt that we needed to, and with my background in climate, I really wanted to have something clear and focused on climate. So we with Professor Christine Valmsler and my often co-author Rosie Bell, we wrote Reconnection, Meeting the Climate Crisis Inside Out. And that took a different tack. We looked at relationship, and we looked at connection, and we looked at mindfulness and compassion as foundational capacities for receptivity, for connection, for collaboration, and we framed the climate crisis as a relationship crisis, characterized by disconnection, and that we could heal this disconnection from nature, from each other, and the harm we're creating on the other side of the world, and ultimately from ourselves, from our bodies, from our hearts. And healing all of these forms of separation, which again, sort of go back to a Enlightenment scientific worldview, or maybe back further to the Greeks. But anyway, would really help us shift the dial on a fundamental mindset level that is driving sustainability crises. Now, of course, we used much of the same evidence, but told a different story.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until in hindsight I was just like, asking this question, what's most profound, I came up with 2 narratives, agency and connection. And reading Ian McGilchrist's work in particular, I clocked, well, I'm certainly not the first person to come up with that dualism. Relationship, agency, will and grace, power and love are some kind of divine polarity, or antinomies, or divine or necessary contradictions, as Kant described them. One foregrounding personal sovereignty. I'm an agent moving through the world, and I can have choice. And we act like that a lot of the time. The other, I'm a result of causes and conditions, and which we love that frame, by the way, when we do something wrong. And like the other one, when we're doing something, when we've done something right,
that'll be good. It was all
foreground how wonderful our agency was, and how ultimately responsible we were for our own success. But often, if you speak to people in sort of mindfulness-y worlds, they're really comfortable with the connection narrative. Actually, not so comfortable with the agency one. And in other groups, it's the other way around. Like, oh, the connection one's a bit touchy-feely. You're getting all the sort of esoteric with your interbeing and your interdependence. But I can totally get down with the fact that this helps me to act, to choose, to see more clearly, and act on that basis. So that kind of laid some groundwork for this inquiry. And then I started to shift my focus for a bit anyway, from mitigation of the climate crisis to societal resilience. And I spent a year, 18 months really inhabiting the not so distant future, and speaking to lots of resilience professionals, societal resilience professionals rather than psychological resilience professionals, about quite how brittle our systems are, how precarious we are now. And inhabiting that future and reading 8 books in a row on collapse, and I just like, I want to keep doing this, and I am, and I'm working with working increasingly at a national level in the UK, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to talk about resilience and how we're going to
Right.
just about be okay, And something deep within me was just like, in some profound way, only love makes sense anymore.
Mm. Mm.
When you're really inhabiting that world, as we all will, whether we're working on it or not, And so I see it as a kind of a tractor point, that this is a fundamental, like, the Greeks talked about it, like say Kant talked about it, McGilchrist more recently, really talking about these broad shapes. So there's something timeless, and also in a world that is increasingly incoherent and coming apart at the seams. Love, I think, will the demand for the language of love,
Yeah.
to have it in the public realm. Say, like, what do we love enough to put ourselves out of this nosedive? That form of
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for politicians who are comfortable with the language of power to start speaking the language of love, because Trump is.
Yeah.
Trump talked about January 6th and the assault on the Capitol as an expression of love. He talked about the Madison Gardens rally as a day of love.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going back to this sort of the hovering threat of fascism. I think we need to, in the parts of the political spectrum that would resist autocracy,
Yeah.
that would maintain hope for a brighter future, we need to balance love in a way that is generative. And just to finish off my little rant here, and allow you to ask some questions, because I think this is one of the things you want to get to. It isn't as simple as saying, like, oh, love is the answer. We still need to talk about love, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was trying to legitimize mindfulness, I was both trying to give a credible policy case and work with those parts of the mindfulness sector, you might call mindfulness teachers and other advocates, who were undermining the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who were our own worst enemies to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the same with love.
Yeah.
There are ways in which love is talked about. There's a way in which, like, love is unbalanced when it isn't paired with power. That make it much more difficult for us to make this a credible political force and something that we should all be considering seriously. So we both need to go to those with power and legitimize love.
Yeah.
And we need to go to those who are totally down with love and legitimize power, or at least nuance what they're saying, so it doesn't seem totally ungrounded and naive, or we can get into exactly what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that tour de force. That was and that's one of the things I've always admired about your work that attracted me to want to interview is the rigor, because I knew there was depth of practice and experience behind your work, but it was rare for me to see the academic rigor applied in an extensive way in a public domain. So this is what interests me about your work, and that is an act of agency, as it were, in itself. So you've alluded to this, and one of the main topics is the relationship between power and love. So I framed a question that just takes us on a deep dive into the topic a bit more. So how do we reclaim power as something sacred and love as something structurally relevant, which you were intimating there when you talked about politicians and practitioners, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things we need to do to make the case for power in some spaces. To frame it as wholesome, and in some way, sacred.
Yeah.
And I think one way of rendering power is to talk about, at a personal level, individuation. That unity is important. Moving towards unity, or at least integrating differentiated parts of the world, community, but differentiation is important.
Yeah.
and to tune into our soul's desire to, what do we want to become? What shapes do we want to grow in? What edges do we want to push? And what's our gift to the world as a result of that?
Yeah.
Is a sacred question, and
Yeah.
and it's part of like what is it to be a conscious entity with this sense of possibility to create worlds. One of my meditation teachers talks about every act of perception being the creation of worlds.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that we live in a participatory cosmos. We're always in some way leaning in and being met by the world. We're both, what we're coming with shapes what arises.
Yeah.
Sort of, similar things coming out of quantum physics and other things. I mean, there's a way in which we participate.
Yeah.
That there's a middle way between like the kind of, say, modernist take on like we're discovering a fixed world out there, an objective reality, and perhaps a kind of like, if you go to sort of the more extreme end of postmodernism, like we just create our own reality, it's just a subjective choice or whatever. But actually there's a middle way between that, which is that we sort of create and discover at the same time. We're leaning in and being met by reality, shaping and being shaped by it.
Yeah.
And that requires, like I say, in every act of perception, right the way up to political, geopolitical contexts, we should perhaps, in some sacred way, understand how we want to individuate, inquire into what is wholesome in the world for us and for other people.
Yeah.
If we think we have the thread of that, try and influence people and enact, like, be a creative force in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ideally in service of wholesomeness.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would say that power is sacred and fundamental. Love is structurally relevant because the psychosocial and spiritual dimensions of human existence are a part of our structure too.
Yeah.
I know that's not often how you use the word. Structural often is used to contrast the inner, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that there is a substrate of our lives and our communities that, and you can talk about social infrastructure, and you can talk about, like, there's the psychosocial substrate of our society is shot through, interwoven, held together by love.
Yeah.
So love is part of, is structural, in as much as without it, we would very quickly spin into chaos.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, as important for us as systems as gravity is for our buildings. The difference between love, of course, is that love can go up and down in the way that thankfully gravity doesn't.
Yeah.
But so that's just to say it is structural.
Yeah.
The other thing is that love, so love, we know from like, there's a lot of evidence about love at a community level, different sorts of bonds, strong bonds, weak bonds, bonds that bridge into other communities. We know that, love enormously important for sort of psychological growth and health through the life course, both in terms of sense of belonging more broadly, and obviously those, like, important caregiver relationships.
Yeah.
And where those bonds aren't in place, it leads to pathologies, frankly. And so we're starting to see, I think, that this is society's problem. We can't just leave it up to chance, or up to the kind of people on the populist right to have an intuition for these things, or for your love to be manipulated by advertisers alone. That it's not like this is a neutral space. Plenty of people are playing with the forces of love, and so we need to think about it. People who would do that, who would be wholesome, who would change things in a positive direction, need to also think about that.
Yeah.
And there's a fantastic book called Political Emotions, Why Love Matters for Justice. It was a seminal text by Martha Nussbaum. Came out 10 years ago, but still just super fresh.
Yeah.
Very good. And in that, she shows how, love has been, for instance, creating monuments after wars, or to celebrate the founding of a country, or to play back a country's values about itself, to inspire national love.
Yeah.
Articulated through national anthems and stuff. There's a section in that about Bangladesh's national anthem, and Tagore's philosophy and sort of sense of needing to use music and art and sculpture, etc., in order to inspire love, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's not like this hasn't been structural before.
No.
It's just that we sort of stepped away from it, feeling like we need to. Yeah, we're scared of strong emotion somehow, and we're scared of like this being, there's a certain intimacy with saying, like, as this NGO or as this public body, we're going to get the love paintbrushes out. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that answer and discourse. Just going back to the previous phase in your career where you worked to legitimize mindfulness in policy and governance, what did it take to bring contemplative practice, the consideration of attention, you might say, into those spaces? And what did you maybe lose or compromise along the way?
Mm-hmm. I have to say that when I was no longer running an all-party parliamentary group and trying to be sort of like neutralize myself, so I wasn't sort of like, too clearly politically aligned.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to keep putting my suit on and going into Parliament or whatever. That was it. It was a relief in a way that I hadn't quite appreciated it would be. And I went through a process of sort of repoliticizing. That was my main experience of it. Actually, was this particular role of being
a convener,
all-party convener. Exactly. That was the clearest thing. And there are certain forms of power, I think, just bending it back to that. That are like Bruce Lee said, like be like water. Because water can flow, it can also crash, and it can wear down the toughest of objects, right? And although we might need a lot of fire, we might need a lot of earth in this time of resistance and really showing up, there's also a role for being like water. At least there is, and I'm not sure about with fascist governments, but like but there is in other circumstances. So there was a lot of playing long games, being clear-eyed about how influence worked and power flowed through something like the British Parliament, Westminster. And also being very good at listening and receptive. I was involved in the policy side rather than the teaching of the mindfulness program. So it was mainly about marshalling forms of traditional power in ways that were new for something like mindfulness, in order to essentially widen access to it around the world.
Okay, and when we did a little bit of preparation for today, going back to this, the notions you were saying about power as it's conventionally construed isn't really familiar with love, and those that favor love or connection aren't necessarily comfortable with power. One of the metaphors you used with me to explain this was having a soft front and an upright spine. And I think that's quite a powerful way to capture the dynamic. And I'm wondering how you recommend people that are listening or interested cultivate those two qualities to be a more integrated, loving yet powerful human being.
Yeah, thank you. Just before I do, Dorothy's, would you mind putting yourself on mute, because
Sorry,
I'm getting a little bit of feedback now. Thank you. Um, yeah, the phrase is often used in mindfulness teaching,
Yeah.
that the practitioner must develop develop a posture both inside and outside
Yeah.
that is strong in back and soft in front.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this speaks to, I think, something about, in an intimate, experiential way,
Yeah.
something about power and love, something about the rigor and the discipline and the sovereignty that comes with, the rectitude or uprightness. In fact,
Yeah.
that was like, if you read the Bushido code from feudal Japan, compassion is often one of the 8 or something ethics that were written about. And then the kind of next one is rectitude or uprightness.
Yeah.
I find that interesting, that pairing. And so for me, the developing a meditation practice was a lot about developing discipline.
Discipline. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people, they get the discipline. Like, I worked with a politician who meditated every day, swam in a cold lake every day, had a background in like territorial army.
I bet.
He was very regimented, and he
Yeah.
came with the strong in back.
Yeah. Yeah.
The conservative politician, you
Yeah.
can imagine, very,
Yeah.
really, really nice guy. And actually, what's revelatory for him, perhaps, is inviting in this quality of softness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I came from a sort of a listening, touchy-feely sort of background, and actually, what I really needed in my life was a bit more spine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a slog,
Yeah.
actually, to develop those muscles.
Yeah.
And yeah, at a personal, like I say, intimate level, that was me developing power.
Right.
My ability to create and enact change in the world, create and resist change in the world, was improved by the fact that I had a bit more spine and a bit more rigor and a bit more discipline and a bit more ability to show up with consistency, etc. And there are lots of ways. So there isn't one size fits all for this.
No. No.
It's like, if you wander off the path to the left, the teacher needs to tell you to go right, and
Yeah.
wander off right, they need to tell you to go left, and then the instructions sound different if you just listen to one instruction.
Yeah.
You need to know where you are, but getting some sense of, am I stronger in love or in power? In that strong in strength of back or softness in front, and how can I invest in the other? And there are many ways, of course, to do that.
Yeah. I resonate with your I don't think I would have actually integrated as much as I have without doing the discipline of regular practice and forging a will to practice almost above everything else or before everything else. And that creates that kind of degree of uprightness and, I'd say, rightful self-confidence. Okay, I think I'm going to skip a few of the questions I planned, but and you alluded to at the beginning the kind of chaotic, disruptive nature of our times and the rate of change of we're getting more rapid, disruptive change happening that is disturbing. And one of the things that you've also spoke about is having a ruthless tenderness to hold the paradoxes. So what would you encourage people to do to hold the tensions between clarity and confusion, grief and hope, love and rage? Because I can predict now and later these are going to get more extreme. I don't think they're going to abate or to diminish.
Yeah. Some fundamental way, oscillation is the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Like, we know that change is the only constant, etc. That means everything's always in flux.
Yeah.
And quite often, that the nature of that change, quite often the nature of that change is oscillation between one and another. and this has something in common with the middle way that I was talking about before.
Right.
And the Greeks had this word metaxy.
Yeah.
And sorry, I have to edit that out. I just had a bleep, and I'm just trying to put myself on mute here. Apologies.
No problem.
The Greeks had a word, metaxy, which is this sort of like, in between flux.
Yeah.
And I kind of think one way of talking about the age that we're going into is an age that is more comfortable with a middle way.
Right.
That is, we're going to have to be comfortable with if we're going to get through this and find a better attractor in the future. And holding conflicting ideas sort of simultaneously.
Yeah.
To borrow a quantum physics phrase, like in superposition, so that they're kind of like in a probability stack together or oscillating between them.
Yeah.
Like that creating and discovering I was talking about, earlier on, is in some way going to help us hold the complexity and the nuance that we're being called to. And this is true on an emotional level as well.
Yeah.
I think developing equanimity, as the Buddhists say, with that process, that sometimes we will be in confusion territory. And it's helpful to just note, I'm feeling confused, lost, overwhelmed. And to have some confidence that will oscillate again. There'll be moments when things feel like they're coming out of the mist. And vice versa, when you're feeling times of clarity, having a kind of epistemic humility, that sense that things feel clear and certain now, but this is, it's unlikely to last, because it's no single view is enough to hold all of this. And love and rage is an interesting one. There's so much I could say about those specific binaries. Of course, that grief being an expression of love. That what was the other one you said there? That hope is a posture that you can maintain irrespective of how hopeful you are of any particular outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But again, these are kind of nuanced positions. And then rage. How can you show up with righteous indignance that is not aggressive and doesn't have within it what the Buddhists call ill will?
Yeah.
Sense of like, can anger be different from ill will? Can we have this strong sense of up with this I will not put, or like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, like you shall not pass, and have the activation that anger can give you, without the rage. I'd say I use the word rage in that way, that can be degenerative, counterproductive, ultimately give your opponents the excuse to push back even harder. So that was a bit of a rant, because there was so much in the polls that you gave me.
Yeah. Well, I think also there's that righteous, say, non-intentional, harmful rage is a kind of quite a high achievement or attainment. And if I look in my own experience, I would have fear I might prevent myself becoming rageful because of thinking or fearing that I can't deliver it in a non-harmful way. So that would be an example of a limitation that I put on myself where there might be rage.
Really, really tricky. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. If you're in a, you have a family story, maybe certainly a societal story
yeah,
that anger is a bad thing, anger means you lost or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
It can
exactly.
stop actually help, that helpful generation of energy that can overcome obstacles. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've covered enough territory for everybody to have been stimulated there, Jamie. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks so much. I've really loved your delivery and hearing your wisdom. So I'm just going to stop right there. Thanks so much.